After a compassionate volunteer at an animal shelter made the decision to adopt ailing shelter dog, uncertainty clouded her mind regarding the correctness of her choice. Yet, the dog's heartwarming reaction upon realizing its adoption brought tears to the eyes of numerous onlookers. Kayla Falloon was a volunteer with the Philadelphia-based Animal Care and Control Team, or ACCT Philly for short. At the age of 20, her affection for animals and her desire to assist them had always been a core part of who she was. Over the past year, she had devoted her time to walking shelter dogs as a volunteer, ensuring their fitness, strength, well-being, and sociability. This fulfilling activity allowed her to engage with animals while pursuing her true passion and contributing to the community. Kayla's dedication to her volunteer work was undeniable, leading her to establish profound and enduring connections with every dog under the shelter's care. While some animals presented unique challenges, such as those who had suffered in abusive environments, Kayla's role included soothing their fears and demonstrating that not all humans were cruel. She encountered dogs that were intriguing and sometimes even aggressive due to their past mistreatment. In contrast, there were dogs grappling with illness or injury, requiring assistance in their mobility. This particular scenario demanded a different approach from Kayla, one characterized by patience and gentleness. She understood that these walks were essential for their recovery and reacquainting them with physical activity. It definitely took a certain type of person to be able to deal with all these different kinds of dogs and keep coming back day after day, but Kayla was committed to her job and wouldn't have changed a thing about it. But there was one particular dog that Kayla had always had a soft spot for. Russ was a straight Pitbull who had found his way to ACC Philly in a pretty horrendous condition. He had been found wandering the streets, and a kind pedestrian had managed to get a leash on him to guide him to the shelter. Unfortunately, though, Russ was painfully underweight and his ribs were visible through his patchy fur. He was also badly bruised, possibly from accidents on the streets or fights with other animals, or even humans kicking him. Pushing the past aside, Russ was suffering from kennel cough, a respiratory virus caused by a buildup of bacteria in his lungs. This cough can sound terrible, and if left untreated, it may cause significant damage. Luckily, the veterinary team at the shelter was treating the virus and monitoring Russ's progress as it slowly cleared up. It's safe to say that at only 4 years of age, this sweet pit bull had been through more than enough in his young life. When Russ first came into the shelter, Kayla was taken aback by his unfortunate looks. Thankfully, she tried not to judge a book by its cover and decided that she was going to take the poor dog for a walk. She thought it would be nice for him to get some positive interactions for a change. However, what surprised Kayla the most was that Russ was actually a very well-behaved dog. He walked alongside her without pulling the leash, didn't bark or try to chase other dogs, while at the same time remaining unafraid of them and even bonding with them. Russ seemed to have a very affectionate and loving side, and despite his rough start, it was obvious that he really was a good boy. That's exactly what endeared him to Kayla. She knew he was special from the very first moment they walked together. Over the next few weeks, Kayla would regularly take Russ out for walks, enjoying her time with him and noticing that he was looking better and better. As the days went by, it seemed that Russ's time with ACCT Philly was doing wonders for him, but the sad fact was that it seemed no one wanted to adopt him. Not only was his fur still patchy, and he was still pretty thin and mangy looking, but people tended to not want to adopt pit bulls. They had a reputation as being violent animals and bad pets. Kayla knew this was categorically untrue, but there was little she could do to convince people otherwise. There was one option, though if no one else was willing to adopt Russ, then perhaps Kayla could step up and be the one to give this poor pit bull a new home where he could be loved and live out his days in happiness. But the issue was that Kayla was unsure if she was ready to adopt a dog of her own. She had always loved animals and intended to adopt a dog one day, but this all seemed very sudden. On the other hand, she couldn't deny how close of a relationship she had formed with Russ. Perhaps it was meant to be, perhaps not. She would have to think it over. There was something that threw a spanner in the works, though. Animal Care and Control Team Philly was facing space issues, and there was a lot of overcrowding. This was not good for the animals, who required their own space. Sadly, there were far healthier dogs at the facility than Russ, and if the overcrowding could not be brought under control, there was a very real risk that the Pitbull would face euthanasia. This was a constant dark cloud in the back of Kayla's mind as she mulled over what she should do next. She couldn't stand to see Russ be put down just because they had no space. It was this simple fact that swayed her and convinced her to make the right choice. She would adopt Russ and give him a new forever home. Of course, this would take quite a bit of preparation. She would need to buy dog beds, food, blankets, and everything that Russ would need at his new home. On top of all that, Kayla would need to better understand what meds the dog needed and get a handle on how to properly look after him and help him on his road to recovery. Setting up everything was not a cheap or easy task, but Kayla found herself getting more and more excited as the days went by. Then, of course, the adoption process at ACCT Philly was not quick or easy. While she was a volunteer and part of the staff, her home had to be inspected to make sure it was suitable and would not result in Russ being returned to the shelter. Of course, Kayla passed with flying colors, and before she knew it, the day came when she would be taking Russ home. Up until that point, she had not treated the Pitbull any differently from how she had always treated him, but this time, instead of going to the nearby park, Kayla drove Russ to her home. He seemed a little weary and confused as he hopped down out of the car, but then it was as if he suddenly realized what was happening. Russ looked from the house to Kayla and back again, seeming to understand that this was his new home. He started to bark happily and jumped up at Kayla, trying to give her hugs and kisses in appreciation. It was a truly heartwarming sight. Russ settled into his new home perfectly, and Kayla was more sure than ever that she had made the perfect choice. She couldn't have been happier to have adopted this poor, seemingly unlovable pit bull. One thing that struck Kayla was how affectionate Russ was. He remained at her side constantly, seeking cuddles whether she did homework or relaxed on the sofa. Even with other options available, he insisted on being close to her. Regardless of her location or activity, he'd always positioned himself as near as possible. Kayla chose to share online photos of her and Russ, highlighting his adjustment to his new home and his affectionate nature, defying breed biases. Witnessing the Pitbull's gratitude for his caring new owner moved people to tears. Regardless of hardships, everyone merits love and another shot at life. Kayla's generosity granted Russ that chance, a gift he forever cherish. What do you think of this heartwarming story? Would you have considered adopting Russ, the Pitbull? How would you have reacted to his profound affection and gratitude? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.